people understand or realize that so much of the Black enrollees in colleges and universities are African. Not African American, African. Their parents immigrated to the States from Africa. Or they are international students who presently reside in Africa and come to the States for university. I'm one of those people. I'm the child of immigrants. I hold dual citizenship in America and Nigeria. Why is this important? Because aside from the fact that both African and African American students are Black, there really aren't that many socioeconomic similarities between the two groups. Our average economic standing between the two groups are different. The average test scores and high school GPAs between the two groups are different. Black African students are more likely to have come from a two-parent household. Black African students are more likely to have parents who have obtained some form of higher education degree. I grew up in a town with a lot of Indian and Arab immigrants. My college application is more comparable to the Indian, South Asian, and Arab students that I lived near than the Black students who lived a few towns over. Why do I say all this? Because at a college like mine where there's only a couple hundred Black people on campus at any given time, a situation that is true across many prestigious universities in America, it is disingenuous to act as if quote unquote underperforming Black students are somehow robbing other students of opportunities of attending these prestigious universities. If out of the 200 Black students at a top university, only 75 of them are descendants of slavery, that is not nearly enough people to even imply that their acceptances to these schools hindered the acceptances of other students. Someone needs to do a study on this if they haven't done it already, but go to any top 20 university. And out of the Black students, if you ranked them 1 through whatever based on their incoming stats, the top 10, 20% of them are going to be African for XYZ reason that I'm not getting into. Once you get into the zone of questioning whether the GPAs and SAT scores of these Black students should have earned them a spot in this school, you don't have enough people left to make a genuine argument. Because assuming all students who are descendants of slavery got kicked out today and replaced with more deserving students, you've opened up maybe 50 spots at a school. That is the most frustrating part about this whole affirmative action shit.
Oh, this is something that needs to be talked about. Recently, I made a video about my experiences in graduate and undergraduate schooling, and I will put that up here. And in it, I mentioned the fact that there are way more Africans than African Americans, especially in certain scenarios. And now, clearly, this conversation needs to be spoken about again. Now, in my video, I spoke about how I felt that in undergrad, there were more African Americans than Africans, right? Now, I specifically mentioned the fact that if you looked at certain majors, then there will be more Africans. Like, for example, I was a biochemistry major. There were more Africans in that program than there were African Americans. But if you looked across all majors, then I believe that there were more African Americans than Africans from what I saw and what I remember, right? And I mentioned how this was different in graduate school. When I went to graduate school, there was like no African Americans. But one thing that she said that makes me think about the conclusions that I came to is that she mentioned top 20 schools. Now, for undergrad, I went to Michigan State University, which is not a top 20 school. I believe it might be like 32 or 36 on the list of like top public universities in the country or something, right? And then for graduate school, I went to University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, which is literally, that might be like number 3 in the country or number 1. It's somewhere like, and I'm talking about public schools, not private schools, because U of M Ann Arbor is a public school, right? But literally U of M Ann Arbor is called a public Ivy League. Like it is that prestigious, right? So now that she specifically mentioned top 20 schools, I'm thinking that may have something to do with the difference that I saw between Michigan State and University of Michigan. I don't know. I'm not sure, but that is something to think about. But I do want to get into the nitty gritty of her video. So she mentioned the fact that she was raised around a lot of immigrants of various backgrounds, Middle Easterners, Indians and stuff, and how her college application was more similar to those people than to the African American students from a few towns over. And this is something that is so important to talk about. So important because, y'all, there are so many initiatives that are in place that are supposed to be helping African American students. The NAACP, the United Negro College Fund, whatever, right? They're supposed to be helping students who are descended from slavery in this country and go through unique struggles and processes because of that. But a lot of times, instead, those resources are taken up by African immigrants who actually come from very privileged backgrounds. Now, not only is it just messed up, period, because you're not African American, so you should not be applying to African American scholarships and stuff. The same way I wouldn't apply to something for Caribbean or African students, why would you be applying to something for African American students? So clearly it's just messed up, period. But then you also have to add in the added layer that a lot of these African and Caribbean immigrants come from a more privileged background. A lot of times, the way the United States is set up with immigration is that, of course, they don't want losers in a country that's just sucking up all the resources. So they make it so that you can only come to the country if you have like a degree, for instance. And that's why, as this woman mentioned, a lot of these African immigrants are more likely to have parents who have degrees. Not because Africans are smarter than African Americans, but because there's a filter on who can immigrate into this country. Then I want to point out another thing. So this woman points out, out of all the students on campus, all the thousands and thousands of students, there may be 200 black students. And out of those 200 black students, the majority are probably going to be African and Caribbean. Not a whole lot are going to be African American. Yet still, the stereotype is that disadvantaged African Americans with lower scores are the ones who are taking people's spots. Nobody talks about how actually most of the black students on campus are not even African American. No, because this is the point that a lot of Africans and Caribbeans don't get. They're literally just being used as like a buffer class. So they have access to a lot of privileges and a lot of other things because the entire point is to make it seem like African Americans are lazy and we're just complaining for no reason. And let me explain exactly what I mean by that. This is the thing, and this is a fact. Don't nobody care if you disagree. You can comment and waste your time. Actually, I feel so. Don't nobody care, okay? America owes African Americans quite a lot. That's not up for dispute. That is just the fact of the matter. We were enslaved for hundreds of years. Then there was slavery and Jim Crow for decades after that. And now technically, segregation has been illegal for like 60 years. Not a long time at all. And that's only technically because white people literally still doing the exact same stuff that they have always done. But on the books, now it is technically illegal, right? So whenever African Americans complain about this and we say, hey, our communities are not in the greatest shape because you spent hundreds of years destabilizing our families, selling our mamas and daddies and kids down south, putting crack in our communities, etc., 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 you owe us. White people have to think of a way to undermine what we're saying. And they do that by using these other minority buffer classes. The first group they used was the Asians, the model minority myth. Hey, look at these people. They're not white and look at what they're doing. But that was an awful comparison because they not black anyway. And we all know that black people go through something that non-black people don't, right? So then white people realize they need to use other groups of black people to make this point, right? So now they use Africans and Caribbeans to push this point. As this African woman said, these immigrants in America are more likely to come from two-parent households and to have parents who have degrees, etc., etc., etc. That's not because those are common things in Africa and the Caribbean. If you look at any place in Africa or the Caribbean, I promise you it's just as many single parents as there are in African American communities. It's just as many uneducated people as there are in African American communities. But like I said, they filter who gets to immigrate here so they can paint a certain picture. So they make sure that they bring the best and the brightest immigrants over here. I promise you, if you broke, busted, and disgusted, it's going to be a whole different story. There was just a whole thing a couple months ago where a bunch of broke-ass Haitians tried to climb over the Texas border, and then white people was like, hell no. They didn't let them Haitians in because, again, they have to put these people through a filter because they're using them to prove a point. Like, I kid you not, I promise you this. I used to date a Kenyan guy, right? And he was from Kenya, born and raised in Kenya, okay? And he went to Michigan State with me, right? And he was in this program. They had a whole African exchange program, okay, where they apparently went to Africa and looked for the best students. So this guy that I used to date, he had gotten the highest score on some exam in Kenya, something crazy, right? So Michigan State was like, oh yeah, we'll give you a full ride scholarship to Michigan State. They don't go over there just picking up any old dummy off the street and being like, yeah, come to the United States, you know, yada, yada, yada. No. They get the smartest people, the people with the most money, the people from the best backgrounds. Those are the immigrants that they are encouraging to come to the United States. Like, they will go to all types of countries and they will look for doctors, engineers, so and so and so. Those are the types of immigrants they're encouraging to come to the United States, not the broke ones. And this is not even just something they do with Africans and Caribbeans. It's something they do with all types of countries and stuff, right? They put these people through a filter and then they compare these groups to African Americans. Well, look at these people. They black too. Oh, look at these people. They not white and look at what they're doing. But the whole time they don't talk about the fact that they made sure to take the best people from those communities. That's why a lot of them countries is still so fucked up, because the best people are being snatched up by the United States. They're being snatched up by Europe, etc., etc., etc. They leave all the ragamuffins behind in that country. Now, I want to talk about something that I did not like about her video, because I feel like the point was, or at least should have been, the fact that African Americans are associated with affirmative action and, oh, you know, they're taking spots from qualified white and Asian students, yada, 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 when the whole time we barely even make up any of the black population of these schools, like, quite literally, right? So it should have been more about how this country is so anti-African American, and they will literally use Africans and Caribbeans as a buffer class in order to promote that nonsense, right? But I feel like some of her statements came down as saying that, like, Africans are better than African Americans. And let me explain exactly what I mean by that. She made a comment like, oh, list the black students in order and the top 10 or 20% are going to be African. And I'm like, I feel like a better point would have been list all of the students in the school in order and the top 10 or 20% are going to be African, because, you know, your whole point was supposed to be that, you know, like, underachieving black students are not taking anybody's places, right? But the way that she presented it made it come off just as, oh, we're better than African Americans and we not taking nobody's spaces. And they might be, but, you know, it's not enough of them for it to be statistically relevant. Like, it came off very wrong. Like, her closing statement was, yeah, assume that they kicked out all of the, you know, descendants of slavery out of school and accepted more deserving students. You know, you've opened up maybe 50 spots at the school. And again, I feel like she was trying to make a good point, but it just came out wrong again, because it would have been better put if she had been like, oh yeah, you know, say they kick out all of the descendants of slavery and accept white and Asian students. You only accepted 50 people. The fact that she said more deserving students, there's that connotation of African American students don't deserve these spots. Because this is my thing, and clearly this is not something that needs to just be told to white people and Asian people. It needs to be told to Africans too. Maybe I didn't get this spot because of affirmative action. Maybe I got this spot because I'm actually just smarter than you. I actually did better than you on the entrance exams. Like, is that really that hard to fathom? Then this is another secret they don't want to tell you, because this is my thing. Okay, you come from a more privileged background than me, so honestly you should do better than me on these tests and stuff. You honestly should. You went to a better school than me. You had better preparation. You could afford tutors and test prep and all of this other stuff. You should do better than me on the test. But the gag is they don't, because I'm telling y'all this is something I noticed in college, and I did not notice this with the African students, but I definitely noticed this with the white students and the Asian students, y'all. They cheated a lot, a whole lot. I'm not even joking. Like, y'all, I'm not kidding. When I was in biochemistry, right, we had this biochemistry lab. Somebody, one of the white students, literally got one of his friend's notebook from the previous year. So he was just copying the answers straight from his friend's notebook, right? And let me tell y'all how stupid this fool is, though. So the way the lab was set up is that it was like the whole semester was geared towards one goal. So every week you would come in and you would do a lab, and, you know, that will build on the story from last week, right? And if I recall correctly, we were trying to do, like, because we had like 2 different strains of E. coli or something, and we wanted to make one of them ampicillin resistant, something like that. So every week we would come to lab, and then we would try to, like, you know, get this plasmid to replicate inside of a virus, and then try to get the virus into the bacteria, and, you know, you get what I'm saying, right? So this is my point, though. Every week we get a little bit more data, right? So this buffoon, again, had his friend's notebook from last week and clearly was just blindly copying the shit. Because one day he turned in a lab notebook and it has values from experiments that we have not done yet. So I remember the professor asked this fool, like, how did you get this value? Like, we haven't even done this experiment yet. Like, that's the experiment for 2 weeks from now. And this fool was just like, I guess I got lucky. And they took that dumbass answer as an excuse. So, like, you telling me you got your friend's lab notebook, you just writing shit. You don't even know what's going on. You have no idea what we're doing. You're just writing shit, right? But this is my point. If my black ass was dumb enough to do some shit like that, I would have had an academic dishonesty stamp on my transcript. They would have been like, girl, bye. Clearly you cheated, right? But white people and Asians can cheat in a way that black people cannot. So even with all the fucking resources that they have, a lot of times they still don't do better on a lot of stuff than us. They just cheat like hell. And I told my ex this because he was African. You know, he hadn't really been around Asians before. I told him they cheat like hell, man. And he was like, oh, you just being racist, right? Come to find out, because his minor was computer science or something, right? So they had to write some code for something. And the way he explained it, because I don't know nothing about computers, but the way he explained it is like, you know, everybody's code is going to do the same thing because they all had to write a code to do whatever function. But everybody's code is going to be a little bit different. There's no way everybody's going to get the same exact code. I guess it's kind of like asking somebody, hey, write a sentence about what you ate for dinner or something. All of us are going to write a sentence about what we ate for dinner, but there's no way we're all going to have the exact same sentence. Even if we ate the same thing for dinner, there's just no way unless we cheated. Come to find out, all the Asian students had the exact same code. How that happened, right? Now, I'm saying this for a point, right? Because nowadays I be in these MCAT preparation groups, these medical school prep groups and stuff like that, right? And a lot of times, a lot of white people, Asians, Africans will post in these groups talking about how they're doing so horrible on the MCAT. Now, for those of y'all who don't know anything about the MCAT, it's the medical college admissions test. And it's on a scale from 472 to 528. The median, like, middle score is a 500, right? And I would say if you majored in something scientific, you know, like chemistry, biology, biochemistry, you should get like around a 500. I would say like, okay, maybe a 495 if you're rusty on some concepts. Because of course, you know, there's some stuff that you didn't really get when you learned it, or you may have forgot some stuff, whatever, right? But if you majored in some scientific stuff, you should not be getting a 480 on the MCAT. These people come in these groups all the time. I'm not joking. I see these posts all the time, right? And they'll be like, yeah, you know, I'm a chemistry major. I just graduated. I have a 4.0 and I got a 480 on the MCAT. And it's like, how as a science major do you do that poorly on the MCAT? Like I said, I'll cut you a little slack if you do a little below average, because it's like, of course, everybody has some topics they not that strong in, or maybe you were rusty in certain stuff, whatever, right? But how you do that bad on the MCAT and you were a chemistry or biochemistry or whatever major, that doesn't make sense. But then you have to realize a lot of these people are cheating through school. They buy in their grades. I've seen stuff like this. I swear to God, y'all, I swear to God, I'm going to tell y'all that story one day. I know for a fact somebody bought their grades in high school. I know for a fact these people are not actually smarter than us. They just have way more resources and they're getting things handed to them. These people are not smarter than us. They don't work harder than us. In fact, quite the opposite. These people have more money, more resources. They can afford to not have to work while they're in school. They can afford to study full time because they don't have to have a job. And they still don't. They still cheat, like whatever, right? But then I see in this group that there are people who have the time to take off of work to study. Like, there are people who be like, yeah, I'm going to study for the MCAT full time, 40 hours a week. And I'm like, really? So who going to pay your bills? But they got rich parents. They can afford to not have to work. They can dedicate their time full time to study. And that's a privilege that Black Americans do not have. So can we really be surprised when somebody gets higher test scores than us after they have been handed every single thing? But again, these people don't realize. No, they do realize. They do realize they're being used as a buffer class. That's all it is. They're being used to push an agenda against Black Americans. The end.